My name vanished from the HR door before my coffee cooled. Where my plaque used to read Liv Kerr, Human Resources Director, there was now a plastic strip that said, Tess. Bold letters, clean edges, like the building had always belonged to her. I was 45. I had spent 17 years building the people systems at Sablebrook Components, our family manufacturing business. I wrote policies, negotiated benefits, and ran investigations that kept us out of court. Mark, my husband, was the CEO. He loved speeches, loved phrases like streamlined and agile, and loved my work most of all because it made him look brilliant. Inside my office, Tess sat behind my desk. My desk. She had my chair adjusted to her height and my monitor angled like a stage light. She popped up with a smile. Liv, hi. Mark said you would train me. He wants you focused on culture and community. I will run HR operations. Culture and community. That was what executives called work. They did not fear losing. I set my coffee down slowly. Operations means compliance, investigations, benefits renewal, hiring approvals, and board reporting. Tess nodded too fast. Yes. He said you have been stretched thin. I let my gaze slide to the open cabinet. Employee files were visible. My notes, my interview scorecards. Then we start with confidentiality. You do not touch records without documenting access. Her smile twitched. Of course. Mark had scheduled a leadership huddle in the conference room. He stood at the head of the table, jacket perfect, confidence louder than the projector fan. Tess sat beside him like a new accessory. Mark beamed. Liv, great. We are streamlining. Tess will handle the heavy HR workflow. You will be our people ambassador. A people ambassador. Like I was a ribbon cutting with a pulse. I kept my voice calm. If Tess is assuming my authority, we need a transition memo, updated delegation of authority, and system permission changes in writing. Auditors ask who approved what. Courts ask too. Mark waved a hand. You always worry. We are fine. That sentence is how companies become case studies. After the meeting, I found Owen Pike, our finance director, near the production floor. He was the kind of man who trusted numbers and noticed motives. That was rough, he said. It was staged, I replied. What are you going to do? I smiled politely. Document, prepare, make sure my future is not based on his mood. Actionable truth for women in family businesses. Memory is not evidence. Evidence is dated, saved, and organized. Back at my computer, I created a private folder named Governance Notes. Inside, I started a simple log. Date, decision, requested by, impact, supporting documents. I saved copies of my job description, the delegation chart, and the HR reporting calendar. If someone is taking your role, you want a record of who took the authority and when. Then I reviewed our ownership. Mark held the largest block, but my name was on shares too, transferred years ago when his father insisted the family protect the marriage partner who actually understood operations. During a divorce, marital assets can include business interests. That is why share ledgers and transfer agreements matter. I also reread the bylaws. The board could remove an officer for cause. Conflict of interest, breach of fiduciary duty, failure of oversight. Not dramatic phrases. Tools. Around midday, Tess asked for my templates. Mark wants the board packet shorter, less detail. I met her gaze. Less detail is more risk. She shrugged. He is the CEO. I smiled, because my revenge was not going to be loud. It was going to be precise, legally literate, and impossible to ignore. I picked up my coffee, still warm, and began training Tess with calm accuracy. If she wanted my job, she was going to inherit every sharp edge of it. Training Tess felt like teaching someone to drive while they removed the seatbelt and asked why the dashboard had so many lights. I built a checklist and made her initial each item. System access, audit calendar, Investigation protocol, benefit renewal dates, board reporting schedule. I did it for two reasons: to protect the company and to create a trail that showed who held responsibility. Practical lesson: if your authority is being shifted, insist on written role changes. Email is fine, a signed memo is better. Vague conversations disappear, documents do not. Tess flipped through my investigation steps. This is a lot. A proper investigation is due process, I said. You document allegations, preserve evidence, avoid retaliation, and keep decision makers out of witness interviews unless counsel advises otherwise. She blinked. Mark likes to sit in. That is a liability, I replied. Witnesses tell powerful people what they think will keep them safe. Later, Mark called me into his office. Tess was already there, sitting in a chair meant for department heads. Mark tapped a folder. Effective immediately, Tess reports directly to me. You report to Tess on operational items. He said it like a weather update. I kept my face steady. HR must be able to investigate executive conduct without executive control. Otherwise, you create exposure for favoritism, coercion claims, and retaliation. Mark laughed. You sound like a lawyer. Lawyers are cheaper than settlements, I said. He leaned forward. You are making this personal. You made it personal when you replaced me with your secretary, I replied. He smirked. Do not be jealous. Jealous is the word men use when women notice the math. I went to Owen right after. Mark is centralizing HR under himself. The board needs to see full reporting. Owen sighed. Two board members asked why packets are thinner. They feel filtered. Good, I said. Filtered information makes directors nervous. At home, Mark began coming in later, guarding his phone like it contained state secrets. He complimented Tess at dinner, casually, like he was describing a new machine. Tess has energy, he said. She gets things done. Energy is not expertise, I said. He rolled his eyes. You underestimate her. No, I replied. I see her clearly. I did not confront him. Confrontation is for people who need validation. I needed leverage. I reviewed household finances and printed statements, not out of spite, but out of strategy. Another practical lesson: comfort is not security. If you cannot explain where money sits, who has access, and what debts exist, you are not safe. I consulted a family law attorney who understood business ownership. I asked targeted questions: how shares are valued, how voting rights are handled during divorce, what temporary orders can prevent asset dissipation, and how to secure access to corporate records. A good plan starts before you announce war. Then proof arrived in plain sight. Sometime in the early morning, I passed the break room and heard Tess on the phone, voice soft. Stop, not here, later. Minutes later, Mark walked by wearing a private smile. On his collar was a faint smear of lipstick, the exact color Tess wore. Anger tried to rise. I let it pass. Anger is loud. Evidence is louder. I opened my governance notes log and wrote, observed executive intimacy indicators, potential conflict of interest, potential hostile work environment risk. Then I emailed outside counsel from a neutral account, asking for guidance on executive relationships with subordinates and disclosure requirements. That email created a time-stamped record that I was acting to protect the company. I looked at the plastic strip on my door. Tess. Fine. Let her have the title. I was preparing to take the power behind it. I confirmed the affair the way women in business should, with documents, not drama. One evening, Mark left his laptop open. No password, no caution. He believed I was too busy being supportive to be strategic. His calendar showed repeating private appointments with Tess labeled vendor review. The locations were restaurants, a boutique hotel, and a spa. Expense receipts showed 2 meals, 2 drinks, 1 room. Misuse of corporate funds is not a marriage issue. It is fiduciary failure. I took screenshots and saved them. Then I built a timeline. Role changes, permission transfers, board packet omissions, and the expenses. Pattern matters. Courts and boards care about patterns. Next, I met two board members I trusted, Dana Loomis and Cal Brenner. Dana valued stability. Cal valued discipline. Both were tired of Mark treating governance like optional seasoning. We met off-site sometime in the late afternoon. I slid my packet across the table, clean and boring on purpose. Dana scanned the summary. He is cutting reporting and centralizing control. Cal frowned. I have heard complaints. Tess is acting untouchable. Because Mark is backing her, I said. And because he is sleeping with her. Dana looked up. Do you have proof? I pointed to the exhibits, calendar entries, receipts, and the documented authority shifts. No gossip, no humiliation, only what created risk, conflict of interest, favoritism exposure, misuse of resources, and compromised HR independence. Dana nodded. This supports an executive conduct review. Cal tapped the paper. And it supports immediate conflict disclosure. I said, it also supports my divorce filing. When I filed with strategy. My attorney requested temporary orders to preserve assets and corporate records. We asked the court to restrict Mark from transferring shares, taking loans against company assets, or altering ownership structures without notice. In a family business, asset dissipation can look like friendly vendor contracts, inflated bonuses, or sudden debts. You stop it with orders and audits, not with arguments. Then I used the bylaws. As a shareholder and an officer, I requested a special board meeting. I cited specific sections: conflict policy, reporting obligations, and duty of loyalty. This matters for women. Know the bylaws, know meeting call rules, and keep a copy somewhere private. Mark responded with a long email about privacy, betrayal, and family unity. He used the word family like a shield. I replied with 2 sentences. My focus is corporate stability and legal compliance. All future communications should go through counsel. That reply removed emotion and created a record. In the office, Tess cornered me near the copier. You are trying to ruin him, she snapped. I kept my voice calm. I am trying to prevent him from ruining everyone. He loves me, she said, eyes bright with borrowed confidence. I smiled, because I am not immune to irony. He loves how you make him feel. Love that requires secrecy is a trap door. She walked off, furious. Then HR problems surfaced. Tess mishandled confidentiality in a supervisor complaint and discussed details with Mark. The employee threatened legal action. I documented the breach and informed outside counsel, because protecting workers protects the company. Around the early morning on the day of the board meeting, Mark arrived with Tess at his side like a trophy. He smirked at me as if I would fold. I carried a binder. Midlife revenge is not a scream. It is an organized table of contents. I sat down, opened to Exhibit 1, and said, let us discuss accountability. Mark finally looked nervous. Good. Nervous people stop improvising. Mark opened the board meeting with his usual routine: bold promises, thin details, and a refusal to answer clean questions. We are accelerating, he said. We are modernizing HR. Tess is improving efficiency. Dana leaned forward. Why did the board packet omit compliance summaries? Mark shrugged. Too much noise. Cal cut in. Noise is not the same as oversight. You also changed vendor approvals without updating the delegation chart. Mark glanced at me. Liv is stirring worry. I kept my tone even. I am reducing risk. I handed out my binder. Each director received an executive summary with numbered exhibits. In governance disputes, clarity wins. A story without documents is a complaint. A story with exhibits is a case. Mark tried to laugh. This is a divorce argument dressed up as business. I held his gaze. A conflict of interest is business. You elevated an employee you were romantically involved with, shifted authority to hide it, and used corporate resources for personal spending. That is exposure. Dana asked him directly. Are you in a relationship with Tess? Mark snapped, irrelevant. Cal replied, relevant to fiduciary duty and workplace safety. I added, even if consensual, others can claim favoritism, coercion, or retaliation. That is how companies lose money and talent. Outside counsel joined by phone and explained standard steps: disclosure, recusal from decisions involving the subordinate, an independent review, and corrective measures. Calm words, sharp impact. Then Dana turned to me. You also referenced shareholder rights. I slid forward the shareholder ledger, the transfer agreement with my name, and a marital asset summary prepared by my attorney. My name is already on a voting block. Additional shares acquired during the marriage are subject to equitable division. Temporary orders are pending to prevent dilution or transfers. Mark slammed his palm on the table. You are trying to take the company. I smiled slightly. I am trying to protect it. Leadership is the tool. Cal looked at Mark. Why did you make Liv train Tess into her role? Mark sputtered. Liv was burned out. Tess was available. Availability is not qualification, I said. And forced training under threat of replacement creates retaliation risk when misconduct is later reported. You created your own legal trap. Dana sighed. We have enough to act. The board voted to launch an executive conduct review and appoint an interim oversight committee. They also ordered immediate restoration of HR reporting to the board audit chair for any executive-related complaints. That step matters. If HR reports only to the CEO, HR becomes a muzzle. Afterward, Owen walked beside me in the hallway. I have never seen the board this aligned. Aligned is what happens when risk is undeniable, I said. Practical advice for women listening. Build relationships with directors before you need them. Share useful information when times are calm. Be the person who makes the business safer. When the storm arrives, credibility becomes currency. One more lesson for women with shared assets. Keep your own access to key accounts and records. If you rely on a spouse password, you rely on their goodwill. Goodwill expires faster than contracts. That evening, Mark came home and tried softness, like a salesman offering reconciliation. We can work this out. I poured tea and stayed standing. We can work out the corporate transition. The marriage is done. His face hardened. You cannot run Sablebrook. I laughed once, quietly. I have been running it. You have been narrating it. Revenge, for me, was not humiliation. It was removing him from the controls and restoring a system that protected workers, shareholders, and the future. The weeks after the board meeting felt like a chess match where Mark still believed charm counted as strategy. He emailed department heads about loyalty. He hinted that my divorce filing proved instability. He tried to flatter Dana and Cal with promises of reform. None of it mattered, because governance is designed to outlast charming men. The executive conduct review moved fast. Council interviewed staff, reviewed access logs, and examined expense reports. They compared my HR transition checklist to what Tess actually did. The gap between confidence and competence became measurable. Meanwhile, the divorce case advanced. My attorney secured temporary orders that restricted transfers, new debts, and unilateral ownership changes. We demanded full disclosure of loans, bonuses, related entities, and any deferred compensation. In family businesses, hidden value often lives in side agreements and future payouts. You find it by asking for documents and using valuation experts, not by guessing. Around the early morning one day, Tess resigned. No goodbye email, no farewell cake. She vanished like a bad smell that finally found an open window. Mark stormed into HR and glared at me. You pushed her out. I looked up from a policy draft. She pushed herself into a role she could not hold. Gravity did the rest. At the next board meeting, Dana opened with the findings: reporting omissions, misuse of corporate resources, undisclosed conflict, and compromised HR independence. Cal added that employee trust had dropped and legal exposure had risen. Then Dana said the sentence I had been preparing for since my name disappeared from my door. The board votes to remove Mark from the CEO role and appoint Liv Kerr as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. Mark stood, jaw clenched. She is my wife. Cal replied, she is a shareholder and the most qualified operator here. Mark pointed at me. This is revenge. I smiled. It is also governance. He left without a speech, because the room no longer belonged to his ego. I walked the factory floor after the vote. Supervisors nodded. Line workers smiled with cautious hope. People do not crave perfection. They crave fairness, predictability, and leadership that does not gamble with their livelihoods. I held an all-hands meeting and spoke plainly. I restored full board packets. I set HR to report functionally to the audit chair on any executive-related investigation. I required annual conflict disclosures from officers and directors, with written recusal plans when conflicts appeared. I approved an independent hotline run by an outside vendor, because reporting channels must not depend on whoever holds power. These changes were not glamorous. They were safety rails. The divorce settlement followed, and the share division did what law is meant to do when emotions fail: enforce reality. Voting rights were clarified. A valuation expert priced the business using cash flow and comparable transactions. Buyout terms were negotiated with deadlines and enforcement language. Another practical lesson: never accept handshake promises in a settlement. Insist on consequences for missed payments, reporting requirements, and security interests when appropriate. Mark tried one last bargain. Give me a seat on the board. I answered, a seat is earned. You treated the company like a mirror. I need leaders who treat it like a responsibility. On a quiet evening, sometime after the chaos settled, I stood in my old office. The door strip now read, Liv Kerr, CEO. Simple, accurate. My revenge plot had a twist, and it was my favorite kind. It taught other women how to protect themselves. Know where the shares are. Keep copies of ledgers and bylaws. Build allies on the board. Document role changes. Separate love from control. And when someone tries to erase your name, remember this: they cannot erase what you own.